Welcome, everyone. We are happy to have you join us today. Thank you for making the time to be with us. We'll be recording today's event, and this session will be available through MIR's YouTube channel. And we will follow by sending an email to all registrants when that video is available, along with some additional information. I'm going to start with a land acknowledgement. As we commence today's session, we invite you and everyone to take a moment to identify and acknowledge the traditional Indigenous lands where we each live, work, and gather. MIR acknowledges that its office in Ottawa or Odawa is located on the traditional unceded territory of the Anishinaabe-Algonquin people. The Anishinaabe-Algonquin people are the traditional keepers of the land, the Ottawa River and its tributaries, and they continue to nurture this territory. I am joining today from the traditional Mississauga-Anishinaabe territory, the land associated with the Williams Treaty of 1923 and Rice Lake Treaty number 20 of 1818. My presence here in Nogojiwanang connects me to Curve Lake First Nation, Alderville First Nation, Hiawatha First Nation, and the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation. We're going to start today with a bit of a safety reminder that today of all days reminds us that traumatic events can happen to everyone, and anyone can be traumatized. From the time it happens, people can experience trauma's effects at different times and in their daily activities. Sexual harassment and gender-based violence take many forms and affect people in any number of ways, including traumatizing or re-traumatizing people. One of the aims of our work is to apply and model a trauma-informed approach, and for us, this means recognizing that people participating in today's dialogue may have been traumatized by a previous event, and this may or may not have involved sexual harassment or violence. While we wish to honor people's experiences, we in no way want people to be traumatized or re-traumatized through today's event and discussions. So we ask you to join us in respecting individuals' experiences and needs by avoiding reference to specific incidents, examples, instances, or dynamics. You'll see on the screen, as well as we'll put it in the chat, that we're sharing links to organizations that may offer support or services if you are triggered. Before turning to introductions, we feel it's important to recognize, and you'll see the names of women, but today is Canada's National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women. It marks the anniversary of the 1989 École Polytechnique massacre in Montreal. As we come together in dialogue and in hope today, let us remember the women killed and those injured on December 6th, as well as the many who have been harmed, violated, injured, or killed since, while reflecting at the same time on the potential that our discussion today carries for helping to end gender-based violence. The names we're seeing are those of the women killed on December 6th. Thank you. My name is Leslie Wolcott. I serve as the Mining Industry Human Resources Director of Equity, Diversity and Inclusion, and I'm happy to introduce Michelle Hahn, a Senior Sustainability and Social Performance Practitioner who's been supporting the resource sector for over 25 years. Michelle is the President and Lead Project Manager of Akashic Communications Corporation, as well as a Registered Therapeutic Counselor. Among her many skills and knowledge areas, Michelle promotes psychological health and safety and improved occupational health and safety performance in the workplace. Michelle contributed substantively to the 2023 Towards Sustainable Mining Safe, Healthy, and Respectful Workplaces Protocol Update. Welcome, Michelle, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Leslie, to yourself and Mir. I'm delighted to be here today to contribute to this meaningful conversation.
You can see on our agenda on this slide, and I'll highlight that our goal today is to deepen the dialogue on sexual harassment and gender-based violence in Canada's mining sector by enhancing understanding of psychological safety, by introducing positive reporting cultures as part of a respectful workplace culture, relating psychological safety and positive reporting to MAC's TSM protocol on safe, healthy, and respectful workplaces in particular, and introducing new MIR materials that will assist you in implementing the new protocols, complying with legislated requirements, and advancing psychological safety, as well as contributing to or establishing a positive reporting culture. I'll say that our starting place for this work is that sexual harassment and gender-based violence are societal issues that are global in nature. They affect the mining sector and mining workplaces. With this reach, the sector is well situated to help address sexual harassment and gender-based violence in Canadian workplaces and society. Without further ado, we'll launch into the protein of our conversations today. We wanted to highlight that today's discussion is part of MIR's Safe Workplaces for All project, which has been supported by the Federal Department of Justice. To date, we've created a number of resources to support dialogue around sexual harassment in the Canadian mining sector. We have a comprehensive report that we shared a year ago, an infographic that sets out legislated requirements by different jurisdictions, and as well as a set of posters, postcards, and stickers that are helpful in terms of building respectful workplace cultures. All of these materials are available on mir.ca for download, and our discussion today will feature more resources that will help to deepen the dialogue that's been ongoing. In preparing for today, Michelle and I thought it important to frame for you the scoping around workplace sexual harassment and gender-based violence by drawing attention to the definition of the workplace itself. Because of mining's varied and sometimes more unique contexts, we wanted to share that the workplace is considered as any place or location that an employee is required to engage or attend in connection with any work activities. And this includes all offices and mining site areas, including change areas, cafeterias, and confined spaces, mining camps, accommodations, and social areas, particularly in remote settings, work-related and work-provided transportation and settings, including airplanes, airports, and vehicles, work-related events or gatherings, and online and electric venues. We also want to highlight that employee actions in surrounding community outside of work hours may still include legislated obligations and protections regarding workplace sexual harassment and violence, and many companies are aware of those and attentive to those. We continue to have work to do in that area and expand our understanding in that area. I think that with that, I'm turning you over to Michelle to address the psychological safety. And Michelle, just feel welcome to tell me to move the slides forward as needed.
Sure, will do. Thank you. Okay, so I thought it would be actually helpful to start with demystifying a bit of a confusing landscape when it comes to the definitions that begin with psych, to more fully connect the dots as to how this relates to addressing sexual harassment in mining and the various tools we'll be reviewing with you. We have psychological safety, psychological health and safety, and psychosocial hazards, just to name a few. So let's start with psychological safety. Next slide, please. And you can do a click. Cultural anthropologist Timothy Clark is the pioneer of the term psychological safety, and he defines it as a condition in which you feel included, safe to learn, safe to contribute, and safe to challenge the status quo, all without fear of being embarrassed, marginalized, or punished in some way. So it's notice that psychological safety is a condition. So this isn't location specific. We're not talking about any specific location yet. It can be anywhere from a family dinner to a gym to your workplace. But psychological safety is a feeling, and it's that we have when we are somewhere where we experience these qualities. Next slide, please. So Clark mapped these qualities in what he calls 4 stages. So we've got inclusion, safety, where people feel included, safe to learn, safe to contribute, and safe to challenge and have the ability to challenge the status quo. So this slide here shows a quadrant layout, whereas some versions of Clark's model, you might see it depicts in a graph, where they sort of start in the lower left corner and kind of go up progressively to the right. Which suggests that they are linear and progressive and implies a building block model where you can't get to the next level or flourish unless the previous stage is firmly in place. So there's a bit of a difference of opinion on whether or not they're dynamic or linear, but where people agree is that inclusion really does need to come first, and it supersedes the other qualities, as inclusion safety really is the space that provides for a respectful workplace. And also is the most direct link to where EDI resides. Although Leslie, feel free to weigh in, because I think you mentioned you see some other applicability in the other stages as well.
Yeah, no, I think maybe because I'm working in this space, I'm often able to see the applicability across all of these 4 quadrants, and so that's all good too.
Yeah, right. So from an initiation standpoint, the most direct link is in inclusion. So essentially, a workplace is psychologically safe using Clark's model. It's one that promotes conditions leading to a shared belief in a culture where people feel. So again, it's a feeling of being welcome, included, valued. It's okay to express ideas and concerns, take risks, admit mistakes, or speak out without fear of negative consequences. Next slide, please. So how does this relate to a Canadian workplace context? So back in 2013, Canada actually took an impressive global lead by releasing the first national standard introducing the concept of psychological health and safety in the workplace. So in groundbreaking news, they recognized the importance of including the mental well-being of employees in the definition of health and safety in the workplace. In the determination of what was a safe and healthy workplace. However, in somewhat confusing news, they also defined psychological safety somewhat differently. And they defined it as the absence of harm and or threat of harm to mental well-being that a worker might experience. So within the national standard context, the Canadian context, a psychologically safe workplace is one that recognizes the impacts of actual or potential psychological factors on a worker's overall well-being. Next slide, please. So what are these factors? So the standard proposed and contained an original 14 workplace factors that they found to impact worker mental health, sense of psychological safety, which hopefully we have a little bit of a better understanding what they're referring to there, participation, morale, retention, and productivity. So all very sort of high level human resources concerns. Either positively, if these features are found to be present, or alternatively, if these factors are absent or not managed well, it can contribute negatively to the threat of harm to mental health. So they work both ways. These factors essentially formed the foundation for the next generation of tools and are now generally also referred to or can be referred to as psychosocial hazards. So we don't have enough time today to delve into each of these 14 factors individually. But as you can see, there's ones here that you would expect and that are quite common sense when it comes to workplace stressors that can impact mental health. So workload management, lack of clear leadership, expectations, so forth. But I've highlighted the ones here, and if Leslie, if you can do a little click, we'll see those. Starting from the far left, that potentially relate most strongly to harassment or sexual harassment or gender-based violence in the workplace. So starting with, actual protection from violence, bullying, and harassment, protection of physical safety, the ability to have psychological support in place, and then the overall leadership culture, including supporting and modeling civility and respect. So they left a number 14 for like an other, because there was recognition that this can be derived from engagement and consultation with employees, which can also reveal all kinds of unexpected factors related either to a specific workplace, but they can also tap into personal or external factors that people bring with them to any workplace. So some recent examples of the latter would include anxiety related to the pandemic or chronic stress relating to overall economic concerns. And Leslie, I don't know if you wanted to pitch in with some other others that you may have run across in your work.
I think those will come through as I'm speaking more to the positive reporting culture in the next few slides, Michelle. So
Okay.
I think that sets these next few slides up nicely in terms of what the research is indicating around some of these other that have come through the consultation. It's perfect.
Okay, great. So that's a perfect segue back over to you.
Thanks. So last year we introduced in our report this idea, the concept of positive reporting, and we wanted to take this opportunity today to focus in a little bit more on some of these elements and how it relates to sexual harassment policies, procedures, and associated activities that can help address sexual harassment in the workplace. This is a concept and an idea that's a little bit in formation and in development, but it does align a lot of thinking and so on that's come out of not only our research last year, but effective practice and individuals speaking about their experiences when it comes to harassment and reporting and so on. So a positive reporting culture, it's very interesting. When Michelle and I first started planning, we talked about, well, is it a reaction? Is setting up a positive reporting culture, is it a reactive mode? And I said, no, it's rooted. We talked about how it's rooted in prevention by linking the notion of reporting to awareness and training. And that the positive reporting is also trauma informed, acknowledging that traumatic events happen and anyone can be traumatized, and seeking to mitigate the effects of trauma or the possibility of re-traumatizing people through different principles and strategies. A positive reporting culture is supportive, and supportive around a number of areas. Supportive with regard to the kind of things that people may need or find helpful when they're dealing with concerns about harassment, incidents of harassment, and processes. So that can relate to things like counseling and leaves. But it's also supportive in terms of things like protecting as much as possible confidentiality, and as well as protection and support, if you will, around freedom from reprisal, as well as protection and supports with regard to malicious complaints. So providing awareness and support with regard to those things. A positive reporting culture also includes ongoing review and a view to improvement. The goal around positive reporting is to help ensure that people feel safe reporting, that they have trust in the reporting and resolution process, that people feel the process is credible, and that through their engagement, they add to this credibility, that they see and perceive consistency in the application of procedures, and also that people understand their role and that everyone has a role to play, that turning a blind eye, so to speak, or condoning harassing behavior through, for example, non-action on that is not kind of synonymous, if you will, with a positive reporting culture. Well, why is a positive reporting culture important? And on this slide, there are various reasons for integrating positive reporting in your efforts to promote respectful workplace cultures. And so remember that this is not separate from, but integral to or part of creating respectful workplace cultures. So on the left of this slide, I've included elements that support respectful workplaces, such as awareness of sexual harassment and gender-based violence, awareness of workers' rights and responsibilities, and awareness of reporting and related processes. It's also helpful in terms of disrupting that culture of silence that is part and parcel of the dynamic of sexual harassment and gender-based violence in society. It also destigmatizes reporting and helps to bar or prevent against the rooting of a poisoned work environment, which is part of a legislated kind of condition, a condition that legislation protects against. It also contributes to physically and psychologically safe workplaces, and they mitigate the effects of gender bias and hypermasculine norms or cultures in the workplace. So all of these pieces on the left relate very much to what research points to people experiencing as they attempt to deal with sexual harassment and violence and or reporting process in the workplace. These are some of the barriers, if you will, that people experience. And on the right-hand side of the slide, we talked to some of the dollars and cents or the business reasons for paying attention to and building a positive reporting culture. So this information comes, the first 2 points come from research completed at Western University, where there's an identification that sexual harassment is costing workplaces an average of $30,750 in US in 2023 value in terms of productivity. And there's also been research, quite recent research, looking at the loss of $2.2 billion annually in shareholder value related to sexual harassment. The last piece I identified as significant, and this is coming from some CAMH research that Michelle shared, that respondents, and I thought it was particularly relevant for the sector, respondents in a study done by CAMH, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, respondents 55 years or older are less likely to report psychological harm at work compared to middle-aged and younger respondents. And I thought this was significant given the aging nature of the mining workforce and what that might mean in terms of presenteeism, production and retention issues, and also in terms of what that means in terms of attraction and retention issues for younger workers. And some of those, potentially some of those intergenerational dynamics in the mining workplace. So having said that, what does it mean to actually establish a positive reporting culture? What does that look like? It looks like acknowledging sexual harassment as a risk and gender-based violence as a risk in the workplace. And then also seeing transparency around reporting and around the issue as an opportunity for helping to retain employees, for example, for helping with productivity, for advancing safety in the workplace. It also is important in terms of ensuring legislated compliance. So meeting obligations helps also to establish that positive reporting culture. The next is the proactive piece that I spoke about around raising awareness, and this can be done via educational materials, and I pointed to some of the materials that Mir has made available, and so these kinds of tools can be helpful for establishing that positive reporting culture. It's also helpful to communicate workers' rights and responsibilities, what the reporting mechanisms are available to employees, and how they access these different support structures. So where does responsibility for addressing sexual harassment and gender-based violence lie within a particular organization? And who does somebody go to when they think they've seen something or may have an issue or concern? The other piece that's important in terms of establishing a positive reporting culture is aligning with existing policy, procedure, activities, and that I've listed on the slide a number of mechanisms that organizations may want to align with. And lastly, part and parcel of establishing a positive reporting culture involves leveraging and using multiple data gathering points for that ongoing assessment that I spoke about earlier. So looking not only at incidents, it can be also looking at concerns raised. It can be looking at demographic data. It can be looking at feedback from employees, things like employee surveys or exit interviews. All of these elements, which may be part of things that organizations do already or can build on things that organizations do already, can be part of establishing a positive reporting culture. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle to speak to a particular case or example of working towards a positive reporting culture.
Yeah, thank you. And just in line with our earlier safety boundary and containment, just so that you know, there'll be no discussion about the incident itself. This is really just about process, this example. So this is a tangible example of a mining company that was in just an established single asset producer, so junior producer, embarking on a positive reporting culture. So they had a code of conduct in place. It articulated the expectation of a respectful workplace, free from discrimination and harassment, the language you would expect. But the language was not too specific beyond that. I was asked to draft a harassment prevention policy and a complaint and resolution procedure that did go beyond their code and added specific and clear definitions for bullying, harassment, sexual harassment, and violence. And that integrated a trauma-informed approach and a clear path for complaints, investigation, and resolution. So this was just board approved mid-2023 and rolled out through training and awareness campaigns at both corporate and site level. Site included employees, contractors, and suppliers. So it says 30 days here. It was not long after at all. It might not even have been 30 days after this very first training session. A female employee of a supplier with this newfound confidence that there were specific systems in place for this very circumstance, that she would be taken seriously and treated with, her communication would be treated with the utmost of confidence, filed a complaint, and it was immediately investigated and deemed legitimate. Post-investigation measures resulted in the dismissal of an offending supplier employee. The company provided emotional and psychological support for the worker. This incident also brought to management's attention of an area of both physical and psychological risk. In this case, it was sort of an out-of-the-way work location, kind of off the beaten path, a little bit not well lit, where women felt unsafe and potentially at risk. So changes were made to operational procedures and training to prevent recurrence. So what was really interesting here was that the company, the corporate value and expectation of providing a safe and respectful workplace was already enshrined in the original code of conduct. In their whistleblower policy, and a grievance mechanism had always been in place. But what was needed to support a positive reporting culture was clearly defined language, tangible processes demonstrating sort of this additional intent to prevent, protect, support, and follow through on complaints of this specific nature, and creating an environment where people felt truly safe to speak up. So this example shows the design and implementation of specific governments and reporting systems to address sexual harassment. And what they did was they created that feeling. They created that feeling of psychological safety, which sort of enabled the approachability and the effectiveness very shortly after it was implemented. So we're still on me.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Sorry for the
Yeah.
pause. Yeah, so before we speak directly to the TSM Safe, Healthy, and Respectful Workplace Protocol, we have one more step in the demystification process. You might have thought I stopped off a little bit early. We just took a break in there. So I'm hoping everyone has now a better idea that, you know, what psychological safety feels like, and then quickly revisiting the national standards definition of psychological safety. It's the absence of harm and or threat of harm to mental well-being that a worker might experience. So that absence of harm is what I call the what. The what is the absence of harm. By comparison, and next slide, please, Leslie. So by comparison, psychological health and safety, so now it's psychological health and safety, we've added health, represents the how. So a psychologically healthy and safe workplace, as defined again by the Canadian National Standard, is one that promotes workers' psychological well-being and actively works to prevent harm to workers' psychological health, including in negligent, reckless, or intentional ways. So notice the action verbs here, right? We have promotes well-being and prevents harm. That's the how. So a little trick I use to remember the difference, well, I've got it pretty straight now, but in the beginning, between psychological safety and psychological health and safety is when you think of that H in the health, think of that as the H in how. So this subtle yet distinct difference refers to the practice of identifying psychological or psychosocial hazards and the assessment and elimination or mitigation of these risks. So psychological health and safety is an approach which, similar to traditional occupational health and safety, uses a hierarchy of controls and continuous improvement model. However, in this case, focuses on the potential of the prevention of potential harm to mental and emotional well-being throughout work-based activities. So the Canadian standard, which is incidentally currently under revision, it's anticipated to be re-released in very short order. It has to this date been like such an excellent and leading guidance tool for education, awareness, and the design of a constructive assessment strategy that its foundation elements have been integrated into both ISO 45003, which is the Psychological Health and Safety ISO standard, which is not as yet a certification standard. They sort of see it as an appendix to 45001, as well as Australia's WorkSafe Code of Practice, which I'm going to review briefly with you as an implementation model, just while we await the re-release on the Canadian revision. So next slide, please. So this here is an example of how. This is an example of the how, of how psychological health and safety can look. And this does represent current labor law. So for any companies with Australian assets, this applies to you. Australian employers must identify psychosocial hazards, assess and understand the nature of these risks, and implement control measures, and continue to monitor and improve these measures, and show how they're doing this. There is also a requirement for engagement and consultation with employees. So just a quick note here for anyone who is familiar with more traditional risk assessment methodology, which is usually severity and likelihood. Here, so in point number 2, seriousness and severity, they mean essentially the same thing. Harassment, sexual harassment, gender-based violence is, of course, the utmost of serious topics, and in the most egregious of cases are criminal offenses. So, the seriousness is, if this were to occur, generally very high. Likelihood is seen slightly different. So as opposed to likelihood being of occurrence, the likelihood of occurrence or how likely it is to happen, likelihood in this case is the likelihood of that particular event causing harm. Which, if we're talking about sexual harassment, sexual assault, or other forms of gender-based violence, is also very, very high. Next slide, please. So as you are becoming more familiar with this subject matter, you can probably already start to see some of the cross-pollination here and how these examples here in the Australia's Code of Practice crosses over with or are derived from very similar psychological factors of the 14 contained within the Canadian standard. And in the case of the Code of Practice, here they do list violence and aggression, bullying and harassment, including sexual harassment, in their potential or known workplace hazards. So these aren't necessarily static. They're not meant to be the same for every organization or every sector or every location, but they do tend to coalesce. There's very common work things that can happen socially in a workplace in specific environments that tend to repeat and can cause psychological stress to workers. Next slide, please. Okay, so how does all of this relate to the new Safe, Healthy, and Respectful Workplaces protocol? So a lot of you know that in June 2023, MAC adopted a revised version of their health and safety protocol, which is now titled Safe, Healthy, and Respectful Workplaces Protocol. So the first thing you'll notice is the addition of the wording respectful workplaces in the title. Which MAC defines as one that is free from harmful behaviors like harassment, discrimination, bullying, or violence. So that's just a straight, that's straight crossover. Just identical, like very close applicability there. The content significance of this update is that this revised protocol includes a new performance indicator 3, psychological safety and respectful behavior, which aims to confirm that facilities are implementing processes and programs that will promote psychological safety and respectful behavior in the workplace. So minor revisions were also introduced just to begin shifting the industry's conception about safety and health management systems to include not only physical risk and hazards, but also these important concepts like psychological health and safety, respectful workplaces, and psychosocial hazards. Also of note is certain of the new requirements related to psychological safety and respect in this protocol also serve as an important basis for the achievement of equity, diversity, and inclusion, and vice versa. So for anyone here who is a current MAC member, this is your remain calm slide. You can see from the color coding that I've put here that MAC has not made significant changes to indicators 2 and 6 for very good reasons. Those are very established, very traditional lines of understanding and reporting. The bulk of the updates that you're going to see are contained in indicators 3, 4, and 5. So members will, of course, have to fully read and become acquainted with these updates, and I'd be more than happy to have further conversations offline about how to prepare for this. But the ones that relate most strongly to our discussion today include in indicator number 1, a commitment related to psych safety, respectful behavior, and the integration of psychological health into occupational health and systems will be required. It's not until, so it's like health in number 2, I said they left it pretty much alone. So it's not until the AA level that facilities would be expected to identify psychosocial hazards. So really the meat is in indicator 3 relating to reporting, relating to culture at the level B criteria. So at the lower end of the criteria scale, facilities must have a mechanism in place for workers to report incidents related to psychological safety and respect. And they also must integrate a trauma-informed process to ensure that people can respond to incidents of psychologically safe, harmful, or disrespectful behavior. Training must, well, that includes training and a more robust definition of their reporting system. When we get to indicator 4 at the B level, training must include aspects of psychological safety, respectful behavior, identification of psychosocial hazards, like what that means, and again, what it means to assess psychosocial risks. And when you get into indicator 5, not until the A level though, but they are asking for annual public disclosure on metrics relating to psychological safety and psychological health and safety. So again, we don't have a lot of time today. I apologize for the breeze through, but even briefly, you can see here that MAC really has fully embraced the spirit and the principles of psychological safety, psychological health and safety, the identification of psychosocial hazards, all of which bolster and support a respectful workplace and a positive reporting culture, and should contribute to addressing sexual harassment in the Canadian mining sector. It really should contribute to this overarching goal.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm conscious of time. I think we just have another couple of slides that we'll run through and highlight. I see some of the pieces in the chat and we'll turn to some questions if we have time, but we will be sharing the video links to the webinar, and that will include reference to our project website on the MIR website that will link you to these tools that I'm about to discuss. So we're excited to be able to update you on some of the tools that we've developed and are continuing to develop as we run through this project and other related projects at the Mining Industry Human Resources Council. So adding to the host of resources that we mentioned earlier, we've developed additional materials that we believe will help deepen the dialogue around sexual harassment and gender-based violence. They are bespoke to the mining sector. They've been reviewed by the well-respected team at Bennett Jones and have had legal kind of review. They are comprehensive tools and they reflect effective practice. Organizations can use and adapt these tools to align with their core values and other mechanisms, such as the ones that Michelle was speaking to earlier, and related processes. So I'll highlight, these are the different tools that we've created. So there are 4 tip sheets coming forward. These tools will all be available in English and French. There are 4 tip sheets coming online. They run 2 to 3 pages in length. The one is focused on providing guidance on adopting trauma-informed approaches, which would be generally useful to organizations and supervisors. There's an item on reporting sexual harassment, and then a next one on documenting incidents, and these would be useful to employees and organizations. And the managing information and maintaining confidentiality would be particularly useful to supervisors, HR professionals, and people in roles where they have responsibility for managing or administering concerns and complaints. Next, and these tip sheets are meant to be accessible, easy reads that help people get familiar with a particular topic or a particular element of a positive reporting culture. Next, we've created what I think is a very comprehensive sexual harassment sample policy and procedure. Again, I mentioned that it reflects effective practice, and so it's a healthy tool, I think, for folks to use and reference, using as appropriate for their context and adapting to their context. Coming next will be an infographic that kind of lays out the high level of some of the steps associated with an effective harassment policy and procedure. And lastly, we felt it important to create a guide and risk assessment tool for addressing domestic abuse and domestic violence and intimate partner violence. And our focus here, along with an infographic, our focus here is on addressing these issues as they present in a workplace, as they present where abuse and/or violence in an adult relationship has the potential to show up in or affect the workplace. So this is especially important given possible effects for individual employees, colleagues, and the workplace generally. And then going back to our definition of workplace, because of the various kind of forms and venues that constitute a mining workplace, we thought that this was important. And next, I'll turn to some general tools that we're working to create. So we're working on a number of resources that will be aligned with and support implementation of TSM. So there will be 4 guides, 3 of which will align with the indicators relevant to the equitable, diverse, and inclusive workplaces protocol, as well as support the Indigenous and community relations protocol and the safe, healthy, and respectful workplaces protocol. So a number of resource tools are coming forward, and they will support training programs that MIR has or has in development. So we currently have an Indigenous awareness training program. We are refreshing our gender equity in mining program to move beyond the binary and to talk about sex and gender and explore issues around gender diversity, gender identity, and gender expression. We continue to offer our intercultural awareness training, which is a nice gateway to some of these topics. And then we're also working on a training program on bias and systemic bias, systemic racism, systemic discrimination, and anti-racism. Each of these programs runs in the neighborhood of 60 to 70 minutes. They do engage learners, and they're meant to complement the toolkit materials that I spoke to and that are identified on the other side of the slide. So with that, I'm aware that we're a little bit behind time. We're right at 1:46, 1:45. So we may not have too much time for discussion. I think what we'll do is promise you that we will follow this webinar with links to the recording, as well as links to our website and links to these materials, so that you can easily engage with this project and help to deepen the dialogue around these important issues in the mining workplace. We thank everyone for their participation. Thank you, Michelle, for helping us to better understand psychological safety and the new TSM protocol today. Thank you to everyone. We're grateful for your time, and we'll send out links in a follow-up email for everyone who's registered for the session. Take care, everyone.